This looks like an ordinary suburban lake. A paved path, a beach, a few boats, a heron standing in the shallows with the patience of a stone. But under these feet is sand that a glacier carried here, and under that sand is the outline of one of the largest Dakota villages in this region. And somewhere along this shoreline, 130 years ago, 20,000 hogs a day were being driven off rail cars into pens. Long Lake keeps its secrets close. Let us go looking for them. Long Lake Regional Park sits in New Brighton, in the northwestern corner of Ramsey County, Minnesota, roughly 10 miles north of downtown Minneapolis. The park covers about 217 acres. The lake itself is about 200 acres, and it is split in two, half of it held by Ramsey County, half of it ringed by private lakeshore homes. Rice Creek slides in from the north. Old Highway 8 runs along the western edge. This is the northern lip of the Twin Cities, where the suburbs thin out into water and sand. Everything here begins with ice. During the last glaciation, a great tongue of ice called the Des Moines Lobe pushed down out of the northwest, all the way to what is now Des Moines, Iowa. But the Des Moines Lobe threw off a strange side branch. Geologists call it the Grantsburg sublobe, and instead of flowing south it flowed northeast, back up across what is now the Twin Cities, aimed roughly at Grantsburg, Wisconsin. That backward push is the single most important event in the story of this ground. The Grantsburg sublobe did something remarkable. It shoved itself across the path of the Mississippi River and dammed it. The river, coming down from the north near St. Cloud, could no longer run southeast through the Twin Cities, so its meltwater and its sand were forced to go somewhere else. They went east and northeast, around the nose of the ice, and they dumped an enormous load of sand across the land as they went. The result is the ground we are walking on. That sand became the Anoka Sand Plain, a rough triangle of outwash reaching from St. Cloud down to the Twin Cities and northeast to Grantsburg. Sand plains are unlike the rest of Minnesota. Water drains through them fast. Soils are thin and hungry. Behind the ice, meltwater ponded up into a shallow lake that geologists call Glacial Lake Anoka, and when that lake finally broke through and drained, near what is now North Minneapolis, it carved the terraces that guide the modern Mississippi. Long Lake is a leftover of that whole violent rearrangement. Here is the specific thing that made this lake. As the ice pulled back, roughly 12,000 years ago, it did not retreat cleanly. It left blocks of ice behind, buried and half buried in all that sand and gravel. Those blocks sat there, insulated, melting slowly. And when a block finally melted, the ground above it collapsed into the hole it had occupied. That hollow filled with water. That is a Kettle Lake, and that most likely is Long Lake. Look at the shape. Long Lake is exactly what its name says, a narrow trough stretched out rather than a round bowl. Many of the lakes across this part of Minnesota carry that same signature elongated hollows where the buried ice sat, strung out along the direction the ice moved. The Twin Cities are famous for lakes, and this is why. Not rivers, not tectonics, not craters. Just ice, sand, and the slow, patient collapse of ground into empty space. Once the ice was gone and the sand settled, life came back to it. But not the dense forest people usually picture for Minnesota. On the Anoka sand plain, the vegetation that took hold was something rarer and stranger. Dry prairie, sand dunes, wetland complexes, and above all oak savanna, a landscape of scattered oaks standing in open grassland, more park than forest, wide enough that you could see a long way between the trunks. Oak savanna exists because of fire. Regular ground fires, some of them set deliberately by the people who lived here, burned back the brush and the young trees and kept the grassland open. The tree that survives that is the bur oak. Its bark is thick and deeply furrowed, and it shrugs off a grass fire that would kill almost anything else. Bur oak is fire made into a tree. Where you see one standing alone with a wide, low crown, you are looking at a survivor of a burned world. That world is nearly gone. Across the Anoka sand plain, oak savanna and prairie now persist on less than 1% of the ground they once covered. Less than 1%. The sand plain today shelters 97 species that biologists list as being in greatest conservation need, and dozens of those are formally endangered, threatened, or of special concern. The big oaks along this trail are the last sentences of a paragraph that has mostly been erased. This is Dakota land. In the Dakota language, this country is Mni Sota Makoce, often rendered as the land where the waters reflect the clouds, and it is where the name Minnesota comes from. Two Dakota groups are historically associated with the Twin Cities, the Mni and the Wapikute. The Dakota are not a chapter that closed. They are here now, in Minnesota, as citizens and neighbors, and the city of New Brighton formally acknowledges them as the original caretakers of this ground. And this particular lake was not a quiet corner of that homeland. It was a center of it. Around the year 1740, by the city of New Brighton's own account, Mni Dakota established a village on the north side of Long Lake, near the inlet where Rice Creek comes in. They called it Ottenwiwakpatten, which is given as village on a stream. Some other local accounts place the settlement a little later, in the 1750s. Either way, it was here long before any of this had an English name. The creek that feeds this lake is called Rice Creek, and that name is not decoration. The Dakota harvested wild rice in these waters. Manumin, as the Ojibwe call it, wild rice, is not a crop you plant. It grows in shallow, slow water, and it is gathered from a canoe. French traders coming through in the 1700s knew this place as the Grand Village. By the 1830s, a French geographer reported it was the largest Dakota village in the region. This shoreline was somebody's downtown. The French name is the Tell. By the mid-1700s, this country was laced into the fur trade. a vast system of rivers and canoes and credit that ran from Montreal to the far northwest. Traders came to villages like this one, not the other way around. What the outside world knew of Long Lake for a century was what a trader wrote in a ledger, and the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, were moving into Minnesota through this same era, a presence that continues across the state today. There is older evidence than the village. Near Long Lake in 1887, the surveyor Theodore Lewis mapped a burial mound about 85 feet long. Inside were human remains, flint arrowheads, and pottery mixed with charcoal. The New Brighton Area Historical Society holds artifacts from this area that may be around 1,500 years old, far older than the village itself. That mound is a grave. The right response to it is not curiosity, it is quiet. The transfer of this ground was not a sale between equals. In 1851, under heavy pressure and the threat of force, the Dakota signed 2 treaties, traversed Des Sioux on July 23 with the Sisseton and Wahpeton, Mendota on August 5 with the Mdewakanton and Wapakute, the bands of this very lake. Together, they opened roughly 24 million acres to settlement. One of the United States commissioners at the table was Alexander Ramsey. This county is named after him. What followed came fast. Charles Perry is recorded as the first settler in this area, arriving in 1849 and buying 89 acres over at Lake Johanna. Mounds View Township, which included this ground, was formally organized on May 11, 1858, the same year Minnesota became a state, a general store, a school, a mission church. For 30 years this was farm country, and nothing much about it suggested what was coming. Then came the railroads, and the railroads changed everything. In 1883, the Minnesota Transfer Railway Company was incorporated, driven in large part by James J. Hill, the empire builder of the Northern Lines. Its purpose was to connect and switch traffic between the many major railways converging on Minneapolis and St. Paul. Suddenly, this quiet farmland north of the cities was not remote at all. It was sitting on rails, with water, and that combination was about to be extremely valuable. In the late 1880s, 4 of the richest men in Minneapolis looked at this lake and saw an opportunity. John S. Pillsbury, the flour miller and former governor, William D. Washburn, another milling magnate, Thomas Lowry, who built the streetcar system, and William Dunwoody. Together they formed the Minneapolis Stockyards and Packing Company, most accounts say in 1887. They bought more than 1,000 acres along the southeastern shore, the shore we are walking right now. The site was chosen for 2 reasons, and both of them are still visible from this trail. Rails, because the Minnesota transfer could feed cattle cars in from every direction. And fresh water, because a stockyard needs enormous quantities of water for the animals. And because in an age before refrigeration, a packing plant needs ice, and a 200-acre lake in Minnesota makes a great deal of ice every single winter. Long Lake was the whole business plan. They needed a name for the town they were about to conjure out of nothing. They chose New Brighton after Brighton, Massachusetts, which was the great cattle market that fed Boston. The ambition is right there in the name. This was going to be the Brighton of the Northwest, the place where the beef of the plains was turned into money. In 1891, on the 20th of January, New Brighton was formally incorporated as a village. The summer of 1889 is when the quiet ended. More than 500 construction workers descended on this lakeshore. What they built was called the Twin City Stockyards, a grid of pens 1,200 feet long by 600 feet wide. At full capacity, the yards could water and feed 5,000 cattle, 10,000 sheep, and 20,000 hogs in a single day. Try to hold that in your head while you look at these reeds and this heron. The pens were only the front end. 2 multi-story slaughter plants went up beside them, and between them they were built to process more than 3,000 head of livestock a day. Around the plants clustered the trades that follow such places: rendering works, a hide factory, the industries that use every part of an animal and smell like it. Everything that came off those floors that nobody wanted went somewhere. Very often it went into the lake. There was a town to match. A 4-story brick building went up, the Cattlemen'S Hotel, later renamed the Exchange Building, part hotel and part trading floor where the buying and selling was done. Hotels, saloons, and boarding houses followed. This was a boom town on a Minnesota lake, loud and full of money and cattle, and it looked absolutely nothing like the picnic tables and volleyball courts that stand here today. It did not last. In 1893, the American economy fell off a cliff in the financial panic of that year, and the New Brighton yards and packing plants shut down. They reopened in 1897, and for a moment it worked. In that single year, the yards received 370,000 sheep, 86,000 cattle, and 63,000 hogs, arriving in 5,989 rail cars. Then in November of that same year, fire destroyed one of the packing plants. The surviving plant staggered on and stopped around 1900. The reasons given are unglamorous and entirely modern. Unfavorable railroad shipping rates, shaped by the powerful Chicago meatpacking interests, made it impossible to compete. And South St. Paul, just down the river, was winning. By about 1901, it was over. The buildings were pulled down over the following decade. The Great Brighton of the Northwest lasted roughly 11 years. But it did not vanish completely. Walk the trail between the beach and the boat ramp, and you can still find the ruins, foundations, and footings in the ground, with interpretive signs to tell you what you are looking at. The Minnesota Transfer Railway kept operating stockyards here in a reduced form into the 1950s, as a place to feed and water livestock in transit to packing plants somewhere else. And the old hotel found a second life. Basewinger's Hardware moved into it and stayed until the 1980s. While the yards boomed and busted, somebody was quietly farming. Beginning in the 1880s, Peter Hipp worked 40 acres on the east side of this lake, the side we are walking now. From the 1920s into the 1970s, his family ran the lakeside berry farm here. 4 generations of Hipps on the same ground. Then, on the 1st of May, 1971, New Brighton bought the land. That purchase is the seed of this park. Meanwhile, the lake was in trouble. Highway construction in the early 1920s had opened this shoreline to commuters and cabins, and the water was taking the consequences, including waste dumped from the old rendering works. In 1934, Henry Rossecker and a group of residents organized the Long Lake Improvement Association to fight for water quality. It still exists. 90 years of neighbors arguing about a lake is its own kind of monument. In 1974, the Minnesota legislature created the Twin Cities Regional Park System, and the Metropolitan Council began designating and funding large open spaces before the suburbs swallowed them. Long Lake was on the list. In 1981, the Metropolitan Council budgeted $1.3 million to acquire and develop what was then called Long Lake Rush Lake Regional Park. Nothing about it was smooth. Neighbors fought the plan, especially the proposed power boat launch on a lake this small. Construction began in October of 1984, and the park was not really finished until late in that decade. Ramsey County and the city of New Brighton run it together under a joint powers agreement, which is a very Minnesota way to solve a problem. And in 1990, an old railway depot from Bulwer Junction was moved here and became the New Brighton History Center, so that the story of the stockyards would be told on the ground where they stood. What you get today is more than 3 miles of paved trail, a swimming beach with a concession stand, a fishing pier, a boat launch, playgrounds, volleyball courts, and 32 picnic tables scattered through the trees. Every August, the city throws a festival called Stockyard Days, which is a wonderfully blunt thing to name a summer party. The park is busy. It is loved, and almost nobody walking it knows what is under their feet. The lake still fights. Its main enemy is the common carp, a fish brought to America from Europe in the 1880s, right about when the stockyards were being built. Carp feed by rooting through the bottom mud. They tear up the rooted plants that hold a lake together, they cloud the water, and they stir phosphorus back up into it, which feeds algae blooms. A lake full of carp turns green and murky and loses the vegetation that everything else depends on. The response has been stubborn and inventive. Since 2015, the Long Lake Targeted Watershed Project has been working the problem. In September of 2017, box nets were set in both basins of the lake as an alternative to winter netting, because nets snag on this bottom and the carp escape. The Rice Creek Watershed District has tested electric barriers on the creek to block carp from moving upstream to spawn, and has dredged sediment out of the basin above the lake. And the lake answers. Great blue herons work these shallows, standing so still they look like a mistake in the reeds, then folding down on a fish faster than the eye follows. Painted turtles haul out on any log with sun on it. The oaks hold the high ground. Geese, red-winged blackbirds and the cattails, the whole ordinary chorus of a Minnesota summer. Ordinary is the wrong word. Ordinary is what took 12,000 years to build. So walk this trail slowly. The sand under it was carried here by a lobe of ice moving the wrong way. The hollow it fills was a buried block of that same ice. The people who lived on this shore for generations called it Ottenwiwikpatten, and their descendants are still in this state. 4 rich men tried to turn it into the Chicago of the North and failed in 11 years. And then a county turned the wreckage into a place where children learned to swim. That is what a small suburban park actually is if you look. Not a blank space between highways, but a place where the ice, the Dakota homeland, the railroads, the killing floors, the berry farm, and a stubborn lake association all left their marks on the same 200 acres of water. Long Lake is still here, still fighting for its own clarity. Thank you for watching. Follow for more trails of the world.